Hello students, welcome back from spring break, the weirdest spring break ever. And we're going to get back to some school here, weird school, just strange times. I was thinking about you U.S. history students just because, you know, we had this project that we did earlier this year, right, where you asked someone in your world to tell their story as it intersected with a larger story in American history. And if any of you ever wondered, what is my story going to be someday, or where is my life going to intersect with U.S. history or world history, here we are, right? This is the kind of like someday we're telling this story to our kids or to U.S. history students in Mr. Welly's class. He's still creaking around out there. So strange days. You know, if there's any good news that we're still doing e-learning here after spring break, it's that the material is great. Our story here is World War II and the Cold War. That's Unit 8. And this is something where A, there's a million great resources out there, and B, it's just fascinating and interesting. And I think it will, I'm not going to need to sort of like do much to reach the screen and really grab hold of your interest, or the question of why should we care. This is a remarkable story. These stories are really close to my own deep hope for you. And my deep hope for my students and for like this course is not like set aside because we're doing distance learning. Like this is still here, right? This is still why I want to do this. This is why I'm pouring everything I got into doing work like this. We've seen this before, right? May U.S. history students like you see God's story in the blessings and curses of their American inheritance and desire to be part of His restorative plan. The stuff we're going to study today is sort of like some of the most dearly bought and paid for parts of our inheritance, the parts that we've paid the heaviest cost for. And that's partly why these stories have such resonance, is that our country really is going to be changed as a result of this, and we are going to be put into the fires and be tested. And we're going to see a great moment where we respond to the testing, not perfectly. We'll see moments where we fail. We will see curses in this story. And there's definitely like the curse of human nature and what the world and what a fallen world looks like. We'll see that all over the place today. But like there's powerful stuff here that I still want to be examining together. So I just want to share that. I believe that will still be alive in our work here. So Lesson 8.1 for today is just kind of talking about this sort of dark clouds rising in the world, right? Evil afoot. And evil is a heavy word, and I wouldn't normally use it to describe a historical process, but I'm going to here, right? Like the second learning target, you see the long-term learning target for this unit, I can evaluate the way we ought to respond to evil and injustice. We're going to see evil and injustice here. And the question is, how should we respond, and what do we do about it? What should we do as Americans? What should you do as an individual? What should I do, right? Where are we called? We'll continue our discussion of justice in this unit. And today, for the mini lesson today, is just why did people turn to totalitarianism, right? Why did people turn to systems that were the opposite of limited government and instead kind of put all the chips and all the power in the hands of one person? Let's explore that today. It's safe to say that, you know, the problems that the United States experienced in the Great Depression were not unique to the United States, right? People all over the fallout in the period following World War I was immense. Again, we talked at length about how that war and the treaty that ended it was misbegotten. So the aftermath of World War I, coupled with the Great Depression, creates a toxic economic mix, certainly, but also a toxic political and social mix. And it was hard for us. It was worse for other places. And in that chaos and in that despair, we see the emergence, we see people turning to the idea that like a totalitarian political system is the answer. And they said, basically, think of it this way. I've used this analogy before, but many people said, look, here's what I'm seeing in the world. Like, since the Enlightenment, Progress has meant moving along the direction of like individual rights, right? Protecting individual liberties. Government exists to secure the rights of the people, right? And individualism and free market competition. And in the wake of this, like this political and human disaster of World War I and then the Great Depression, many people said that doesn't look like progress anymore, right? What that looks like is sort of bumper cars, where all that happens is sort of like individuals, people are sort of constantly slamming into each other, right? Conflict, and nothing is done, right? Like democratic systems are becoming synonymous with ineffective responses and pointless Senate subcommittees, you know, and calling on the public to do more, and the public's like, no, we don't like this, and people change in their mind, and it's fickle. And we don't actually go anywhere, right? We're actually in decline. All this sort of individualism and market thinking is too individualistic. And what we actually need is someone to stop the system, like shut down the power and say, everybody, like in our little bumper cars, instead of smashing into each other, how about this? Let's get outside of the bounds here of Enlightenment individualism and let me point the way forward, right? Point the way forward to progress, right? Totalitarianism said what we need instead of conflict and bickering and sort of and governments that are incapable and too weak to do anything. We need governments powerful enough to lead everybody and to point the way for everybody. All right? And we all get over this notion of like, but my rights and my individualism and I'm a super special person and nobody else in the world is like me, and just say, for the good of the state or the good of the community, the collective, I find my role in the system and we hit a new gear and we go. Right? That is the appeal of totalitarianism, ladies and gentlemen. And if that is going to be the solution, right? If we're going to turn the power over to one person to do this, then why would we sort of say, you know, that there's some piece of paper, some constitution that limits their power? No, don't do that. The good of the group requires that we are able to sort of like follow the leader down this road, right? And the leader needs the tools at their disposal, the police force, the secret police, to make sure that there aren't people sort of like pulling the opposite direction or sabotaging this. We might need censorship in order to kind of control the message for everybody that we are moving in this direction. Because they said, you know what? We tried the democratic thing, right? We tried the free market. We tried this stuff. It didn't work, right? The solution, real progress, requires real power to a leader. Let's look first briefly at the Soviet Union. All right. At this period of time between the wars and leading up to World War II, the Soviet leader is Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin and his predecessor Vladimir Lenin converted Russia into a communist totalitarian system in the aftermath of World War I. And that required, you know, the abolition of private property, the seizure of all land, of all industry by the state, right? The redirection of the public, like now you're going to share these things, you're going to share those things, and some people are like, I don't like that, and it's like, you're gone, you're sent to prison camps, or you're just executed. There's a massive, awful societal reorganization that is done with maximum haste and maximum brutality. There are some results, right? Some positive economic results, but it's just like a horrible human cost, all right? And all of it is done for this sort of utopian vision of a communal shared future. What it creates is a terror, right? What it creates is a terror and a government organized famine. I'll link to a supplemental video that will have more details about this. Stalin is not a good guy, ladies and gentlemen. At the same time, in World War II, he's our friend. In World War II, he is a useful ally, but never, never is a good dude. Most notoriously, two formidable states in Western Europe, Italy and Germany, turned to a totalitarian system called fascism. And here is really where the war begins, because the aggressiveness on their part is where we're going to see the start of the war. Fascism is like a specific type of totalitarianism. Totalitarianism, again, just means all the political power is held by one single person, or like in Japan, one single small group of people. In Japan, it's like a clique of military leaders, right? Fascism is like, it's a variety of it. Sometimes you could call it kind of extreme right-wing totalitarianism. Even that's a little bit funny. But I'd say the things that make fascism are, it's super militarized, right? Its leaders present themselves in sort of military gear or quasi-military gear, and they want to turn the whole state, the whole nation, into sort of like a paramilitary style outfit, right? Like we're all going to act as one, right? We're all going to sort of be hyper disciplined in some militarized style. It's also often very racially tinged, right? There's sort of like a bunch of racial theories about who the true Germans are or the true Italians are, who we really are, and it's sort of suggested, or sometimes not suggested, just stated overtly, like, and there are people in our midst who are not us, right? And what are we going to do about that for the good of our future progress, for the collective whole, right? Fascism is kind of backwards looking in a sense. Fascism says, it sort of points back to this time when our nation and our people was great and glorified, right? So in Italy, it points back to the Roman Empire, but it's kind of a mythologized version of the Roman Empire. In Germany, Hitler points back to like certain medieval German princes and rulers, or even people like Charlemagne. But I'll say even that's all kind of this mythologized version of the past, right? Sort of like King Arthur and his knights kind of stuff. And so we point back to when we were great, and we say, we were great because we were unified around great and powerful leadership. And are we courageous enough to do this again, all right? And they demand this sort of fanatical belief, right? This sort of fanatical devotion. And Hitler called it like blind fanatical devotion. He didn't call it privately, like at like Nazi party rallies. It's like the way that Germany will sort of restore itself out of the ashes is through the blind fanatical loyalty of its people. All right? And the loyalty is to the party, the loyalty is to him. And the way that they are able to kind of expand the power of the state often is by sort of like through these kind of conspiracy style thinking, right? Conspiratorial thinking, or talking about like the communists in our midst who would undo this, or socialists, or of course Jews, right? The enemies in our midst that we have to weed out, right? They're weakening us, and we are here to be strong again. And it all sounds crazy, and I'll just say it was all popular, all right? Why? Well, despair and dysfunction is a huge piece of this. And also there is this desire in people to belong to something, right? And to sort of believe that they are on the right side. Or even I would say there's a desire in people to kind of fall in line behind a leader that they believe in, right? And almost like zealously and blindly devote themselves to that cause. We need to be the kind of people as Christians who push back against that and don't do that, ladies and gentlemen. That should be something where it's like, no thanks, right? But I'll say there are like tribalistic buttons in that can get pushed, and that fascism definitely pushes. Meanwhile, over in Asia, right? Japan is taking advantage of all the destabilization during this period of time after World War I and in the Great Depression, and seeking to expand in search of natural resources. We'll learn more about that later in this unit. But in Japan, the same thing's going on. So my hope for today was we get some sense of why places in the world are turning to this, why it is disturbing and dark. We'll see some more videos. These supplemental videos are highly recommended, so I want you to check them out. There's also going to be a homework assignment about Hitler. Hitler is at the center of this whole story. I want to understand what makes him tick as best we can. So there'll be a reading there that's due for next time. Thank you, students. This is admittedly a strange way to come back from spring break to just talk about evil and Hitler, but it's interesting. And so I look forward to where we're going to go next. Have a great day. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.